The Kepler-7 research station floated quietly in the darkness of space, far from Earth and far from any help. It was a small station, not much to look at from the outside, just metal and glass and blinking lights against the endless black. But inside, 47 humans lived and worked and dreamed of the stars. Commander Daniel Harris stood at the main observation window, drinking his morning coffee. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and kind eyes that had seen too much of space to be surprised by anything anymore, or so he thought. Behind him, the station hummed with the quiet sounds of people doing their jobs. Scientists checking data. Engineers fixing things that always seemed to break. The smell of breakfast drifting from the small cafeteria. It was a peaceful morning. The last peaceful morning any of them would ever know. Katie Morrison was in the engineering bay when the alarm started. She was 28 years old, with short brown hair and grease on her fingers from fixing a water recycler. Her husband Nathan was somewhere on the upper deck, probably lost in his research as usual. He was a scientist, always thinking about distant galaxies and cosmic mysteries. Katie loved that about him, even when he forgot to eat dinner because he was too busy staring at stars. The alarm was different from the usual ones. This was not a broken pipe or a power fluctuation. This was the sound that meant something was coming. Something big. Katie ran to the nearest screen and felt her blood turn cold. A ship had dropped out of faster-than-light travel just a few thousand kilometers away. It was massive, dark, and covered in weapons. She knew the shape from her training. Everyone who worked in deep space knew that shape. Vorthak. The Vorthak were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had been conquering and killing since before humans learned to make fire. They took what they wanted, and anyone who stood in their way simply stopped existing. Other species had learned to bow, to negotiate, to give the Vorthak whatever they demanded. It was easier that way. Safer. Commander Harris was already on the communication system, his voice calm and steady. Vorthak vessel. This is Commander Daniel Harris of the Human Research Station Kepler-7. We are a peaceful scientific outpost. We mean you no harm. Please state your intentions. The response came in a voice like grinding metal. Human. I am Warlord Draxon of the Vorthak Empire. Your station and all its contents now belong to us. You will surrender immediately, or you will die. You have 60 seconds to decide. Harris kept his voice level, though Katie could see his hands shaking slightly. Warlord Draxon. We are happy to discuss this matter. Perhaps we can find a solution that benefits both our peoples. There is no need for violence. The Vorthak laughed. It was an ugly sound, like bones breaking. 40 seconds, human. Harris tried again. Please. There are families here. Scientists. We are not soldiers. We have no weapons that could threaten you. Let us talk about this. Surely there is something we can offer, some arrangement we can make. 20 seconds. Katie watched the commander's face. She saw the moment he understood that words would not save them, that nothing would save them. He turned to face his crew, these people he had lived with and cared for, and his eyes were full of sorrow. All hands, he said quietly into the station-wide communicator. Get to the emergency shelters. Now. The first blast hit before anyone could move. The station screamed as metal tore apart. Katie was thrown against a wall, her ears ringing, her vision blurred. She could hear people shouting, crying, praying. The lights went out. Emergency red replaced them, turning everything into a nightmare of shadows and blood. She ran without thinking, her body moving on instinct. She had to find Nathan. She had to find her husband. The upper deck was chaos. Fires burned where consoles had exploded. Bodies lay still on the floor. Katie screamed Nathan's name over and over until her throat was raw. She found him near the research lab. He was bleeding badly, a piece of metal buried in his side, but he was still alive, still conscious. He looked up at her and smiled, that gentle smile she had fallen in love with. Katie, he whispered, you have to go. The shuttle bay. The shuttle bay. The shuttle bay. Not without you. She tried to lift him, but he was too heavy, and her arms were too weak. Another blast shook the station. The ceiling cracked above them. Nathan grabbed her hands with surprising strength. "Listen to me," he said. "You have to survive. You have to tell them what happened here. Promise me, Katie. Promise me you will live. Nathan, please." He pushed her away just as the ceiling collapsed. Katie fell backward, and when she looked up, there was only rubble where her husband had been. She wanted to die. She wanted to lay down and let the station fall apart around her and just stop existing. But Nathan's voice was in her head, telling her to live, telling her to survive, telling her to make sure the galaxy knew what the Vorthak had done. So she ran. The shuttle bay was a miracle. One small shuttle remained, damaged but functional. Katie found 7 others who had made it. 8 survivors out of 47. They sealed themselves inside the shuttle and launched into space just as Kepler-7 broke apart behind them. Katie sat at the communication console, her hands bloody, her face wet with tears. She activated the emergency broadcast and began to speak. "This is Katie Morrison of Kepler-7. We have been attacked by a Vorthak warship without warning or provocation. 39 people are dead. Commander Daniel Harris tried to negotiate. He tried to find peace. They killed him anyway. They killed everyone." She paused, looking back at the debris field that had been her home. "My husband died protecting me. He told me to survive. He told me to tell the truth. So here is the truth. The Vorthak are murderers. They did not want negotiation. They did not want peace. They wanted blood, and they took it." The message traveled through space at the speed of light. It would take 3 days to reach Earth. 3 days for humanity to learn what had happened to their people. In those 3 days, Katie and the 7 other survivors drifted through the darkness, keeping each other alive on hope and anger, and the memory of friends who would never see home again. When the rescue ship finally arrived, Katie was barely conscious. But she held tight to a small photograph she had managed to save from her quarters, a picture of Nathan on their wedding day, smiling at her like she was the whole universe. She would keep that promise. She would survive. And she would make sure the galaxy understood exactly what kind of monsters the Vorthak were. Back on the remains of Kepler-7, Warlord Draxon stood in the wreckage, laughing. He had crushed these humans like insects. Soon their leaders would come begging for peace, offering whatever he demanded. It was always the same with weak species. He had no idea what was coming. None of the Vorthak did. None of the galaxy did, because humans were not like other species. And they were about to teach the universe a lesson it would never forget. The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest room in known space. It was built on a station at the center of civilized territory, where representatives from 100 different species gathered to talk and argue and pretend they were keeping the peace. The walls were made of crystal that showed the stars outside. The seats rose in great circles around a central speaking platform. It was meant to inspire awe and cooperation. Today, it was filled with panic. Ambassador Zilthar of the Villani Collective stood at the center platform, his long blue robes flowing around his thin body. The Villani were an old species, known for their wisdom and their skill at making enemies become friends. Zilthar had personally negotiated an end to 3 different wars. He had never failed to find a peaceful solution. "My fellow beings," he said, his voice calm and measured, "we have all seen the transmission from the human survivor. This is a tragedy. Yes, but it is not the first time the Vorthak have acted aggressively. We know how to handle this. We will arrange a meeting. We will discuss terms. We will find a compromise that allows everyone to move forward." The chamber murmured in agreement. This was how things worked. This was how things had always worked. Then, the human ambassador entered the room, and everything changed. Claire Patterson was a small woman with silver hair and a face that gave nothing away. She walked slowly to the center platform, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Every eye in the chamber was on her. Every being wanted to know what humanity would do. She stood there for a long moment, looking around at the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but clear. Humanity has received your offer to mediate, Ambassador Zilthar. We thank you for your concern. However, humanity does not negotiate with murderers. We have nothing further to say to this council regarding the Vorthak matter. The chamber exploded into noise, shouts of disbelief, cries of concern, demands for explanation. Zilthar raised his hands for silence, his face showing confusion for the first time in decades. Ambassador Patterson, surely you understand the situation. The Vorthak are powerful. They have allies. A war would cost both sides greatly. If we simply talk to them, we can arrange for compensation, for territory, we do not negotiate with murderers. But surely some compromise. We do not negotiate with murderers. The words hung in the air like a blade. Claire Patterson turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. The council sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what had just happened. Over the next few days, the situation only became stranger. The United Earth government stopped responding to all communications. Human civilian ships began leaving the outer sectors of space, returning to territories closer to their homeworld. Military vessels vanished from their usual patrol routes. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Zilthar called an emergency meeting of the Council's Intelligence Committee. Representatives from 12 species sat around a secure table, sharing whatever information their spies had gathered. Our agents report that human shipyards are working at full capacity, said the representative from the Kreth Dominion, a reptilian being with scales that shifted color when he was nervous. They were shifting rapidly now, but we do not know what they are building or where the finished ships are going. Their communications networks have gone completely dark, added the Solari observer, a floating sphere of light that spoke in musical tones. We cannot intercept any military transmissions. It is as if their entire fleet has simply disappeared. Perhaps they have fled, suggested a Vorthak observer who had been allowed to attend. His voice was smug and confident. Humans are weak. They know they cannot defeat us in battle. They are probably hiding in their home system, hoping we will forget about them. Zilthar shook his head slowly. I do not think so. I have studied humans for many years. They are strange creatures. They form attachments to each other that defy logic. They mourn their dead with great intensity. And when they believe they have been wronged, they do not simply accept it. Then what are they doing? The Kreth representative demanded. I do not know, Zilthar admitted. But I am afraid. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Warlord Draxon received reports of the council meeting with great amusement. He had claimed Kepler 7 as a forward base, and was fortifying it with weapons and soldiers. Soon, more Vorthak ships would arrive. He would use this location to expand further into human territory. The other species are fools, he told his officers. They think humans will fight us. Humans are scientists and farmers and artists. They are not warriors. They will complain to the council, and the council will pressure them to accept whatever terms we offer. This is how it has always been. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Vrak, seemed less certain. Warlord, the human fleet has disappeared. Our scouts cannot locate any of their military vessels. Does this not concern you? Squarter, Draxon laughed. They are hiding. Frightened animals always run to their holes when a predator appears. When they realize we will not stop, they will come crawling back to negotiate, and then we will take even more from them than we originally planned. Vrak nodded, but his eyes remained troubled. He had fought many species over his long career. Some begged. Some fought. Some tried to run. But he had never encountered a species that simply went silent. It felt wrong. It felt like the quiet before something terrible. On Earth, Katie Morrison sat in a hospital bed, watching the news. Her injuries were healing, but the wounds inside her never would. She had told her story 100 times now. To officials, to journalists, to anyone who would listen. The whole planet knew her name. The whole planet had seen her tears, and the whole planet was angry. She watched as protests filled the streets of every major city. Not protests against the government, but protests in support of action. Signs that read, "Remember Kepler 7," and "No negotiation," and "Justice for the 47." Ordinary people, millions of them, demanding that their leaders do something. A nurse came to check on her, a young man with kind eyes. "How are you feeling today, Mrs. Morrison?" Katie looked out the window at the blue sky of Earth, the planet she had not seen in 3 years. "I am feeling patient," she said quietly. "I am feeling like something is about to happen." "Something is about to happen," the nurse agreed. He glanced around, then leaned closer. "My brother is in the Navy. He cannot tell me anything, but I can hear it in his voice. They are planning something big. Something the Vorthak are not expecting." Katie thought of Nathan, of his gentle smile, of his final words. Survive. Tell the truth. She had done both. Now all she could do was wait and trust that humanity would do what needed to be done. Somewhere in the darkness of space, 47 warships moved in perfect silence, heading toward a destiny that would change the galaxy forever. The universe held its breath and waited. 3 weeks passed in silence. The galaxy waited and watched and worried, but nothing happened. The Vorthak continued to fortify Kepler 7. The Galactic Council continued to send messages that humanity ignored. Species across known space began to wonder if the humans had simply given up. "They have accepted defeat," Warlord Draxon announced to his officers. "The silence is the sound of a broken species. Soon their diplomats will come begging, and we will take whatever we want. Perhaps we will claim their entire outer territory. Perhaps we will demand tribute. The possibilities are endless." His officers cheered. They had seen this pattern before with other species. First anger, then silence, then surrender. It was only a matter of time, but deep in the void between stars, something was moving. Admiral Ryan Cooper stood on the bridge of the USS Sentinel, the flagship of the human fleet. He was a man in his 50s, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen both the best and worst of humanity. He had fought pirates and rescued colonists, and spent 30 years protecting people who could not protect themselves. Now he was about to do something no human commander had ever done before. Around him, 47 warships moved in perfect formation. Each ship was named after one of the people killed at Kepler 7, the Daniel Harris, the Nathan Morrison, the Emily Chen. 47 names, 47 debts to be paid. "Admiral," his executive officer reported, "all ships confirm ready. Fleet is on schedule. We will reach the target coordinates in 4 hours." Cooper nodded slowly. "And the Vorthak?" "No indication that they have detected us. Their scouts are focused on Earth. They are not looking in this direction." "Good. Maintain communication silence until we are in position." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The Vorthak expected humans to either attack Kepler 7 directly or come begging for peace. They had prepared for both options. They had not prepared for what was actually coming. Instead of attacking the Vorthak forces, the human fleet was moving toward 3 critical points in space. These were hyperspace junctions, places where the shape of space itself made faster than light travel easier. Any ship wanting to enter or leave Vorthak territory had to pass through one of these 3 locations. It was simple physics. In 4 hours, humanity would control all 3 junctions. The entire Vorthak Empire would be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Their supply lines, their trade routes, their connection to their allies. Everything. On the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Zilthar was preparing for bed when his communication device suddenly lit up with urgent alerts. He grabbed it and felt his blood turn to ice. "Deep space sensors are detecting massive energy signatures," his aide reported, voice shaking. "Human warships. Dozens of them. They are appearing at the Vorthak hyperspace junctions." Zilthar rushed to the Council's situation room, where confused and frightened representatives were already gathering. The main display showed a map of Vorthak space, and at 3 points around it, clusters of blue dots had appeared. Human ships, 47 of them, spread across 3 locations in perfect strategic positions. "They did not attack Kepler 7, Zilthar whispered. They did not go after Draxon. They went for the throat. The Kreth representative was staring at the display with wide eyes. This is impossible. Moving a fleet this size without detection, timing the arrival at 3 separate locations with such precision. We could not do this. No one could do this. The humans just did, Zilthar replied. At that moment, every communication system in the galaxy received a transmission. It was broadcast on all channels, in all languages, impossible to ignore or miss. Admiral Cooper's face appeared on screens across 100 worlds. He spoke calmly, without anger, without hate. Just simple facts, delivered in a steady voice. To the beings responsible for the massacre at Kepler 7, this is Admiral Ryan Cooper of the United Earth Fleet. You have murdered 47 innocent people. You refused all attempts at peaceful communication. You laughed at the deaths of scientists and engineers who meant you no harm. He paused, letting the words sink in. Humanity does not accept this. We do not forgive this. And we will not negotiate about this. Our terms are simple. You have 48 hours to surrender every individual involved in the attack on Kepler 7. Every officer who gave orders. Every soldier who fired weapons. Every being who participated in the murder of our people. Cooper leaned forward slightly, and his eyes seemed to look directly at whoever was watching. There will be no discussion. There will be no compromise. There will be no deals. Surrender the killers, or face the consequences. 47 humans died under your weapons. Our response will be exact. You have 48 hours. The transmission ended. In the council chamber, no one spoke for a long moment. Then chaos erupted. Representatives demanded action. Some wanted to help the Vorthak. Others wanted to help the humans. Most just wanted to understand what was happening. Zilthar stood quietly, watching the map. He had studied human history. He knew about their wars, their revolutions, their long struggle to build a peaceful society. He had always believed that struggle had made them weak, that humans were too divided to act together against an outside threat. He had been very wrong. At Kepler 7, Warlord Draxon received the transmission with disbelief. He had been conquered before. He had faced enemies before. But those enemies had always fought in ways he understood. They attacked with fury or pleaded with desperation. They made demands that could be bargained down. This was different. This was cold. Get me the Vorthak High Command, he ordered. We need reinforcements. We need our allies to intervene. These humans think they can threaten us. But they will learn. Warlord, his communications officer interrupted, voice trembling. We cannot reach High Command. We cannot reach anyone outside our immediate area. The human ships at the junctions are blocking all faster-than-light communications. Draxon felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. On the Sentinel, Admiral Cooper sat in his ready room, looking at a photograph on his desk. It showed a young woman in a graduation gown, smiling proudly. His daughter. She had been a scientist on a research station just like Kepler 7. She could have been one of those 47. Every being in the human fleet had a similar reason to be there. Family who worked in space. Friends who explored the unknown. The simple understanding that what happened to those 47 people could happen to anyone. This was not about revenge. This was about making sure it never happened again. Cooper touched the photograph gently, then returned to the bridge. 48 hours. Then the galaxy would see what humanity was truly capable of. Somewhere in the darkness, Katie Morrison watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her face. The fleet was coming. Justice was coming. Nathan would not have died for nothing. The 48 hours passed slowly. Every species in the galaxy watched. Every news channel broadcast constant updates. Every being with access to a screen waited to see what would happen. The Vorthak High Command spent that time arguing. Some wanted to surrender Draxon and his officers. The warlord had always been aggressive, always pushing boundaries. Perhaps it was time to cut him loose. But others refused. The Vorthak had never surrendered to anyone. To bow to humans would show weakness. Other species might be inspired to resist. The empire could crumble. In the end, pride won over reason. The Vorthak announced that they would not surrender anyone. They called on their allies to intervene. They threatened to destroy any human ship that did not withdraw. Admiral Cooper received their response with a simple nod. He had expected this. Humans understood pride. They understood the need to appear strong, but they also understood consequences. Begin operations, he ordered quietly. What followed was unlike any military campaign the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Vorthak expected fury. They expected humans to charge forward with guns blazing, driven by emotion and anger. That was how young species fought. That was how species who had never learned the true cost of war behaved. Instead, the humans fought like surgeons cutting out a disease. No civilian targets were touched. No planets were bombarded. No space stations with innocent beings were attacked. The human fleet focused entirely on military vessels and military installations. Nothing else. When Vorthak warships tried to break through the blockade, human vessels did not destroy them. They disabled them with precision strikes to engines and weapons systems. Then Marines in armored suits boarded the crippled ships and captured the crews. Prisoners were treated according to strict rules. They were fed. They were given medical care. They were allowed to send messages to their families. The Vorthak had never experienced anything like it. Sergeant First Class Tony Martinez led one of the Marine boarding teams. He was a big man, with a quiet voice, and hands that could crush metal. His team had taken 6 Vorthak ships in the first week alone. Each time, they offered the enemy a chance to surrender peacefully. Most did. "I do not understand you," a captured Vorthak officer said to him during one boarding operation. "We killed your people. We murdered them without mercy. Why do you not do the same to us?" Martinez looked at him for a long moment. "Because we are not you," he said simply. "Because becoming monsters to defeat monsters means the monsters win. Because those people at Kepler 7 deserved better than for us to abandon everything they believed in." The officer had no response to that. Week by week, the Vorthak military situation grew worse. Supply convoys could not reach their forces outside the blockade. Ships ran out of fuel. Soldiers ran out of food. Weapons ran out of ammunition. Without their connection to the homeworld, without their supply lines, the great Vorthak war machine began to starve. Meanwhile, human intelligence teams identified every officer who had participated in the Kepler 7 attack. Names, locations, movements. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing was left to luck. This was not revenge. This was justice, and justice required precision. 3 weeks into the campaign, human special forces executed a series of coordinated strikes. In a single night, 17 Vorthak officers were captured from locations across the occupied zone. They were not killed. They were not tortured. They were simply taken, quickly and quietly, while the rest of the Vorthak military watched helplessly. Among those captured was Subcommander Vrex, the weapons officer who had given the order to fire on Kepler 7. He had been hiding in a fortified bunker, surrounded by guards, certain that no one could reach him. He was wrong. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as these events unfolded. Species that had lived in fear of the Vorthak for centuries saw something they had never imagined possible. The Vorthak were losing, not because they were outgunned, not because they were outnumbered, but because they were outthought at every turn. How are they doing this? The Kreth representative demanded at an emergency council session. The Vorthak have a larger fleet. They have more experienced commanders. How are humans winning? Zilthar had spent weeks studying the human campaign. He thought he understood now. The Vorthak fight to conquer. They fight to take territory, to accumulate power, to prove their dominance. Humans are not fighting for any of those things. They have one goal: to bring the killers to justice. Everything they do serves that single purpose. There is no wasted effort, no unnecessary destruction, just relentless, focused pressure. It is terrifying, the Solari observer added quietly. They are not fighting with hate. They are fighting with purpose. I do not know which is more dangerous, At Kepler 7, Warlord Draxon watched his empire crumble around him. His reinforcements were not coming. His allies had abandoned him. His own officers were being captured one by one. For the first time in his long life, he understood that he had made a terrible mistake. He had killed 47 weak scientists and expected no consequences. Instead, he had awakened something that would not stop until it had taken everything from him. Finally, the Vorthak High Command contacted the human fleet. They were ready to talk. Admiral Cooper listened to their offer of negotiation with a face of stone. "There is nothing to negotiate," he replied. "Surrender Warlord Draxon and his remaining officers. Face justice for your crimes. Those are your only options. But surely we can discuss terms. You had 48 hours to discuss terms. That time has passed. Now, you have two choices. Surrender, or watch your military capability disappear piece by piece until there is nothing left. The choice is yours." 24 hours later, Warlord Draxon was delivered to human custody. He was not beaten. He was not tortured. He was simply put in a cell and told he would face trial for his crimes. As the cell door closed, Draxon looked at his human guards with confusion. "Why do you not kill me? I murdered your people. I would kill you if our positions were reversed." One of the guards, a young woman with serious eyes, answered him. "Killing you would be easy. Justice is harder. You will face your victims. You will hear their names. You will answer for what you did. And then you will spend the rest of your life knowing that you failed. That is worse than death. And that is what you deserve." Draxon had no response. For the first time in his existence, he was truly afraid. The blockade was lifted. The war, such as it was, came to an end. But the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had shown what it was capable of when pushed too far. And every species in the universe was watching. The trial was held on Earth, in a great hall, built specifically for the occasion. It was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Every species that could receive signals watched as the Vorthak prisoners were brought before human justice. There were 23 defendants in total. Warlord Draxon sat at the center, his massive frame looking strangely small in the prisoner's dock. Beside him sat Sub-Commander Vrex, who had given the order to fire. Around them sat the other officers and soldiers who had participated in the massacre at Kepler 7. The proceedings were slow and careful. Prosecutors presented evidence. Defense lawyers argued their cases. Witnesses testified about what they had seen and experienced. Everything was documented. Everything was recorded. Everything was done according to law. Many species found this confusing. Why go through such effort for beings who had shown no mercy themselves? Why give them lawyers and fair hearings when they had given their victims nothing but death? But humanity had learned something over its long history. Revenge felt good in the moment, but it changed nothing. It did not bring back the dead. It did not heal the wounds. It only created new cycles of violence and hate. Justice was different. Justice was about truth and consequences. Justice was about showing the universe that some things were not acceptable, no matter who did them. Katie Morrison testified on the third day of the trial. She walked to the witness stand with steady steps. Though her hands were shaking, she looked at Draxon, at the being who had ordered the death of her husband and her friends, and she did not look away. "Tell us what happened," the prosecutor said gently. So Katie told them. She told them about the morning of the attack, about Commander Harris trying to negotiate, about the explosions and the fire and the screaming, about finding Nathan bleeding on the floor, about his last words, about the promise she had made to survive and tell the truth. By the time she finished, there were tears on faces throughout the courtroom. Even some of the alien observers, species without tear ducts, showed signs of deep emotion. Draxon watched her with eyes that had lost their arrogance. Something had changed in him during the months of captivity. Perhaps it was hearing the names of his victims spoken aloud, one by one. Perhaps it was seeing their faces, their families, their stories. Perhaps he was simply beginning to understand what he had destroyed. The trial lasted 8 weeks. In the end, The verdicts were unanimous. Warlord Draxon was found guilty on 47 counts of murder. Subcommander Vrex was found guilty on the same charges. The other defendants received various sentences based on their level of involvement. The sentencing hearing was the moment the galaxy had been waiting for. Many species expected executions. The Vorthax certainly did. Death was what they would have given their enemies. Death was what they deserved. Instead, the judge, an elderly woman named Martha Sullivan, delivered a different kind of justice. "Warlord Draxon," she said, her voice firm but not cruel. "You have been found guilty of murdering 47 innocent people. These were scientists, engineers, doctors, and dreamers. They were mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, husbands and wives. They did nothing to harm you. They asked only for peace. And you killed them anyway." She paused, letting the words settle. "This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of release. You will spend your remaining years in a facility designed for beings like you. You will be treated humanely. You will be given food and shelter and medical care. But you will never again be free. You will never again command anyone. You will never again take a life." Draxon stared at her. "Why not kill me? It is what I would do." Judge Sullivan looked at him with something that might have been pity. "That is precisely why we will not do it. We are not you. We will never become you. And that is the difference between us." The other defendants received similar sentences. Life imprisonment for the leaders, long terms for the soldiers, no death penalties, no torture, just the cold, unending reality of consequences. 1 week after the trial ended, Ambassador Claire Patterson returned to the Galactic Council. The chamber that had once buzzed with noise fell completely silent as she walked to the center platform. Every eye was on her. "The trial is concluded," she announced. "Justice has been served. The beings responsible for the massacre at Kepler 7 will spend the rest of their lives answering for their crimes." She looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the gaze of representatives from 100 different worlds. "Let this serve as a message to every species in this galaxy. Humanity desires peace. We welcome friendship, trade, and cooperation with all who approach us in good faith. We do not seek conquest. We do not desire empire. We want only to explore the stars and build a future where all beings can thrive." Her voice grew harder. "But understand this clearly. If you murder our people, we will not come to this council begging for resolution. We will not negotiate for the return of bodies. We will not accept compensation for lives. We will find you. We will stop you, and you will face justice. Not revenge, not destruction, justice, because that is who we are." She paused one final time. "We do not negotiate with murderers. We end their ability to murder. Remember this." She walked out without waiting for response. The chamber remained silent for a very long time. In the months that followed, something changed throughout the galaxy. Species that had lived in fear of stronger powers began to stand up for themselves. Trade routes that had been dominated by threats and violence became more open. The Vorthok, stripped of their military power and their reputation, retreated to their home systems and focused on rebuilding. New first contact protocols were written. At the bottom of every species' guidelines for meeting humans, the same warning appeared: do not harm human civilians. Humans do not negotiate with murderers. Humans do not forget. Humans respond with unity, precision, and absolute resolve. Their justice is fair, but certain. Approach with respect and you will find no better friend in the galaxy. Approach with violence, and you will find an enemy that does not stop until the last debt is paid. Katie Morrison returned to space 6 months after the trial. She was promoted to chief engineer and assigned to a new research station, Kepler 9, built to continue the work that had been interrupted so violently. She stood at the observation window of her new quarters, looking out at the stars. On her desk sat the photograph of Nathan, still smiling at her from their wedding day. She touched the frame gently. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "I survived. I told the truth." And they answered. Somewhere out there, 47 names were carved into a memorial on the remains of Kepler 7. 47 people who had died because they believed in peace and exploration and the best possibilities of life among the stars. They had not died for nothing, because humanity had shown the galaxy something important: that mercy and strength could exist together, that justice and compassion were not opposites, that a species could refuse to become the monsters they fought and still win. The stars glittered in the darkness, full of mystery and danger and possibility. Katie smiled and got back to work. There was a whole universe waiting to be explored.